when you get on a plane and you got an economy ticket? How you walk by all those people all spread out in their business class seats? And maybe you even peek behind those curtains and you get a glimpse of those champagne sipping people in those comfy seats that turn to beds. And have you noticed how these people seem all calm and cool about where they are, like it's no big deal? Some even have the audacity to look unhappy. And that's when I think, if I was in those seats, I'd be so happy then. Those seats are being wasted on unhappy people. You've thought that. Or maybe you've had the experience when you held a lottery ticket in your hand and you bargained, dear God, or if you're you, dear to whom it may concern. If this ticket is a winner, I promise to be happy forever. Not like all those other stories that they tell about lottery winners. I'm gonna be different. But pull out the magazine as you sit in your hard economy seat with your plastic cup of water and that tiny little bag of nuts. Or open your computer and check to see if that surprise billion-dollar inheritance has finally come through. And you are likely to also come across study after study that breaks the news to you. That's right, lottery tickets, big inheritances, first-class seats will not actually make you a happier person. Now, if you are like me when you read those articles, your response is simply, yeah, well, give me a try. Bring it on. I'll be happy when I have that stuff. I mean, truthfully, I did once get bumped up to first class on an international flight, and I can tell you for sure that I was pretty darn happy sipping that champagne. But according to all those smart people who study these things, external pursuits of happiness are not the ticket, pun intended, to lasting happiness. In psychology, they actually have a name for it. They call it the hedonist treadmill. Have you heard of this? Another treadmill we're on. The theory of the hedonist treadmill states that regardless of what happens to people, their levels of happiness will eventually return to their personal baseline. In other words, all those things you think will make you happy, like getting married or moving to a new house or getting a promotion, and all the things you fear might make you sad, like losing a job or suffering an accident, will only temporarily impact your true happiness level. Now, this theory is based on a study by psychologists Brickman and Campbell, and they studied two groups of people. One was a group of people who won large lottery prizes, and the other was a group of accident victims who became paralyzed. Now, the research revealed that in the long term, neither group appeared to be happier than the other. Now, although lottery winners and paralysis victims experienced initial reactions of happiness and sadness, respectively, from their situations, over time, their happiness levels actually went back to their personal, original happiness set point. Now, it's an interesting finding because, well, we seem not to believe it, do we? As a species, we are happiness chasers, always trying to shift something outside of us in hope that I will be happy when, or at least I'll be happier when. And hey, the pursuit of happiness is written in the Declaration of Independence. We see it as part of our identity. Now, when I was a kid, I had this dog. His name was Sparky. Sparky was a Springer Beagle mix, and boy, did he have energy. He was raised on a farm and had run of the farm and actually run of any place he wanted to go. That's just how it was out in the country. But then we moved to a neighborhood of houses, and Sparky's life changed. With no fields to wander in or cows to harass, Sparky took up a new activity, chasing cars. Now, to be clear, Sparky was all of 40 pounds and, yay, high off the ground. And my breath would stop each time a car would zip by, and there would go Sparky chasing the thing down. I have no idea what he was going to do if he caught it. But undeterred by his defeat, he would just shake it off after the car had sped by, head back to the yard, and get ready for the next attempt. We're kind of like Sparky, aren't we? We spend a lot of time chasing happiness, and we know little about what to do with it when we catch it, I think. Because after all, how often do we get something we were convinced would bring us happiness, and then, I realized it's not what I thought it was going to be. Or I realized I didn't really want that. I want that other thing, right? The internet is monetized by that knowledge that, like Sparky, we will not be deterred, and if one chase doesn't bring us happiness, we're going to keep on clicking and chasing and clicking and chasing. Right? Am I the only one? We all do it, but why? Why? Well, of course, the easy answer is adrenaline and dopamine, right? I'm sure Sparky got a rush from his pursuits just like we do. I mean, here is this lottery ticket. I kind of got a little bit excited when I bought it this morning. Who wants me to rub it off right now? If you're in the presence of a lottery winner when they win the lottery, I think you could have. For centuries, psychologists and philosophers alike have been asking the question, what makes us happy? Their conclusions have led to lots of books and lists of the top 5 or 10 things we need to do to become happy. And not that these lists are bad, but I think beyond the list of things to do and beyond the experience of that caffeine-fueled moment of excitement, we all know that one, or the dopamine-inducing clicks on our devices, there are a few fundamental questions I think we need to ask. First, do we actually know what true happiness feels like? And second, are we capable of just hanging out with it, of just being happy? Maybe it's not about what we do to make ourselves happy as much as it is about our ability to simply identify and spend time in a state of happiness without a reason. Have you ever tried that? It's kind of scary. It's like, why would I do that? The truth is, we seem to have little ability to just be happy. I'm going to invite you into an experiment this morning, okay? So play along. I'm going to ask you to take a couple deep breaths, center yourself. If you're comfortable with these kind of exercises, closing your eyes, I'll invite you to close your eyes. And everybody place the fingers of one hand on the inside wrist of the other and see if you can find your pulse. It might help if you close your eyes and really kind of focus on that. Now, doctors care about your resting heartbeat. They want to know, where do you return again and again? So find your resting heartbeat in this moment. See if you can feel it. And very gently shift that same level of focus that you needed to find your pulse. Shift that and see if you can look inside your body and your emotions and sense a happiness pulse. Just right now, what is the baseline of your happiness? What does it feel like to you? Perhaps it feels like the place where there is well-being, satisfaction. So just how happy are you? Without judgment, go ahead and give your happiness baseline a number between 1 and 10, 10 being the highest. Okay, what's your baseline number of happiness? Okay, now, and you can close your eyes if this helps, but go ahead and imagine someone giving you something that you think will increase your happiness right now, something you really wanted. So imagine yourself having this thing or receiving this thing. It doesn't have to be a big thing like a lottery ticket. It could be something simple like a cup of coffee or just someone rubbing your shoulder, something that just will uplift you and bring you a little bit more happiness. So imagine yourself getting that, having that, feeling that rise in happiness. Now note how that feels. I want you to try to memorize that feeling. All right? Now imagine that person's taken that thing away. You don't have that anymore. It's gone. So drop back to your baseline. You don't have the thing that was bringing you happiness. It's been taken away. Okay? Now here's the last thing we're going to try. Without stimulation, without thinking of anything, without imagining anyone giving you something, see if you can have a visceral experience of happiness at the same level as when someone gave you the thing you wanted, but without thinking of receiving that. So we're just going to practice lifting up your happiness. Right now, see if you can feel just a calm satisfaction, well-being, happiness greater than normal for you, just for no reason. See if you can hold that. See what that feels like. Memorize that feeling. And when you're ready, if you have your eyes closed, feel free to open your eyes. Were you able to do it? Were you able to feel that little shift a little bit? Yeah. Although initial research suggested that 50% of our set point was genetic and nearly impossible to change, studies since then had found that our set point can actually be changed by simply doing exercises like what you just tried, by simply training the brain to feel happy, to feel elevated without external stimulation. Other studies found a positive impact on meditation, such as the loving kindness meditation, when we consciously raise our energy to send out kindness to another, or when we have moments of appreciation, when we sit and appreciate things, that can raise our set point. Even a conscious effort to really savor the things that are contributing to our temporary happiness help raise our baseline. I don't know about you, but how many times I get my bubble tea, and that first sip is so good and I feel elevated and happy, right? And then the rest of the thing, I just am doing multitasking while I'm drinking it and I miss it, right? So it's the practice of really savoring whatever we're experiencing. But it's kind of scary, I think. Which brings us to the elephant in the room. And I know that you, as you use, have been thinking about this the whole time. I've been waxing on about happiness. Right? I know you guys. I can read your mind. How can we be happy when there is so much suffering in the world? You use. Yeah. Well, psychology has a name for that too. It's called happiness guilt. Let's talk about it. There are people in this world going through incredible hardship, personal grief, victims of disaster. There's people living in poverty, dealing with racism and hate. There are wars raging in this very moment, disease and death. And maybe you are experiencing hardships yourself right now. So as compassionate and justice-minded Unitarian Universalists, shouldn't we be reminding each other that the world is broken and that we are in such dire conditions that the only acceptable responses are outrage and fear and sadness? How can we possibly feel happy all the time? Reverend Deborah, you're telling us to be selfish. Who thought that? I know a couple of you did. Well, to be clear, I'm not suggesting that we feel happy as our only emotion all the time. That's not even possible, is it? Life is not always unicorns and bubble baths. Things happen, and we rightfully experience a wide range of emotions and reactions to those things. And sometimes those things are so big that it takes time, and it may feel like we will never or should never be happy again. Sometimes we may even tell ourselves that to be happy means that we do not care. And so we hold back our own joy and our happiness out of some sort of guilt. But I think we make a few mistakes when we deny happiness. First, sometimes we mistakenly think that those experiencing hardship want us to suffer with them. I don't know about you, but I've never called my kids and said, by the way, kids, I'm sick this week. I would really appreciate if you wouldn't be happy at all this week. Right? I need you to know I'm suffering and I want you to suffer with me. Rarely do people suffering wish their suffering on others. The second mistake is that nasty habit of comparison and conflating. Now, if we deem someone's life circumstances as horrible, we sometimes conclude that, well, they couldn't possibly be happy in that situation. We conflate experiencing something hard or even devastating with the inability to also experience happiness. But the truth is, someone can be unemployed, unhoused, poor, in a really hard life situation and still experience happiness. Just as much as someone can be employed and housed and fed and in first-class seats and still be unhappy. I saw this lesson up close when I was in India. There were lots of people living in circumstances, and I thought, wow, how can you not be miserable all the time living like that? And yet, so many of these people living in these circumstances were some of the most joyful, loving, compassionate, humble people I had ever met. They taught me circumstance does not negate happiness. Now, the third mistake I think we make is perhaps the biggest, and the one I want to encourage us as Unitarian Universalists to really consider. Too often we have forgotten that happiness is actually a healing salve for our own and for the world's heartbreaks. Happiness is a spiritual practice of reclaiming our very souls. It is what can lift up the oppressed. It is the strong energy needed to counter and break through hate and anger. Not happiness when, but just happiness for no reason. Remember that story of Patch Adams, the doctor who realized that spreading happiness was some of the best medicine. Instead of dwelling on the fact that terminal patients were dying, he wanted to do what he could to bring happiness to the life they had left. And that is where he focused his ministry and his doctor's practice. The late Archbishop Desmond Tutu once said, "Discovering more joy does not, I'm sorry to say, save us from the inevitability of hardships and heartbreaks. In fact, we may cry more easily, but we will laugh more easily too. Perhaps we are just more alive as we discover more joy, and then we can face suffering in a way that ennobles us rather than embitters us." Isn't that beautiful? I think happiness is the anti-oppressive work that we talk about wanting to do. Happiness is the anti-racist work that we claim is important to us. Have you ever been to a black church on a Sunday morning? Right? They are singing and celebrating and praising and practicing in the face of hardship practicing being happy. Sometimes in our UU spaces, we look pretty depressed. We want to remind each other of the hardship of the world and all the work we need to do. Oh, man. Right? But what if instead we started reminding each other? We use this space on Sunday mornings to remind each other of the beauty and the joy in the world. That when someone walks in here and they are down, they are like Jillian's story, little Tamsin's face. Right? What if you were that face for another? What if our first principle said, we affirm and promote happiness for no reason? Right? What would that look like here in our community, and what would that look like out into the world if we decided to practice that, I'm just going to call it Tamsin, happiness? It's a new coin I just raised. It's going to be in the Urban Dictionary next year, Tamsin. Now, maybe I was mistaken about Sparky, my dog, because maybe he really didn't care if he caught that car. Maybe he was just being joyous, and running was just brought him joy. My friends, I wish for you great joy and great happiness when things are good, and especially when they are not, because I believe that true happiness is the only first-class seat. It's the only lottery ticket we really need. And I really think as Unitarian Universalists, we need to reclaim that part of our faith. We need to live into that part of our faith and share that part of our faith. Are you with me?